Whether a therapist can accept a gift from a client is not as straightforward as one might hope. The cost, setting, and intent are among some of the things that we must consider. Therapists also need to understand their own drive for why they might want to accept or decline a gift. We explore all of these in the video to help you get a better understanding of when to accept or decline a gift, as well as some tips for how to go about doing this. But first, my name is Keegan. I have a master's degree in counseling. I make videos like this to help you better understand psychology, counseling, and mental health. To begin, let's talk about what the American Counseling Association, or the ACA, has to say about accepting gifts. The ACA states in code A.10.F, counselors should understand the challenges of accepting gifts from clients and recognize that in some cultures, small gifts are a token of respect and gratitude. When determining whether to accept a gift from clients, counselors take into account the therapeutic relationship, the monetary value of the gift, the client's motivation for giving the gift, and the counselor's motivation for wanting to accept or decline the gift. Let's dissect this in more detail. First, let's look at cost. We must consider the cost of the gift the client is trying to give us. If they're trying to give us something like a card, the cost of this is likely minimal. However, if they're wanting to give us something like a new car as a token of their appreciation for us, this would be a significant cost for the client. As far as I'm aware, there's no specific dollar amount of what is considered a small gift. However, the most common cutoff seems to be around the $20 mark. So as we talk through cost, you might have some follow-up questions, such as, won't accepting a card from a client possibly impact their confidentiality or breach the confidentiality of our relationship? Or maybe you're wondering, if the client's extremely wealthy, would it then be okay to accept a car from them? So keep questions like this in mind as we continue, because you may be able to answer them as we go. However, it's important to keep in mind that we shouldn't necessarily choose to accept or decline based on one of these points alone. Instead, we should work to consider all of them and more as we try to make decisions on whether to accept or decline gifts from clients. Next, let's look at the policy of the site where we might be at. Some places may say that you cannot accept a gift from a client under any circumstances. It won't matter to the site whether they're wanting to give you a card or a car. The answer should be no. Other sites may set a specific dollar amount, and if the gift is under that dollar amount, then they would allow you to accept it. Yet other locations, though, may say it's entirely up to the therapist to decide whether or not to accept or decline the gift. Something that I have seen at some locations is that they will share the gift. So if they receive a gift from a client, they will put it in a place where the other therapist can also see it, use it, or enjoy it. And it's not just their gift then, it's given to all of the therapists at that location. This would look different based on every gift, but it might be that they got a book from a client and so they put the book in the site's library where everyone shares the books of that spot. It might also be that they got baked goods and so they may place the baked goods in a location where all of the staff can enjoy them. This is a good time to talk about confidentiality though. If a gift, such as a card, is being placed in a spot where other therapists at your location can see it, we might do something like obscure the name. Or if a client does something like sends flowers, we may remove the tag that comes with the flowers a lot of times that has the client's name on it, and we may just place the flowers themselves then in a location where others can see and enjoy them. We should also be mindful to do things with letters and cards, like storing them in a way that complies with our site's rules around storing information that includes information that might identify a client. This would also then apply for how we destroy or get rid of that item. We have to do it in a way that would maintain the confidentiality of our client, as well as comply with our location's policies related to this. Next, let's consider some of the things that we should have in mind regarding the intent of the client. As the ACA states, some of this may be cultural, and so that's something that we'd want to have in mind. The client might bring the gift as a token of their appreciation, or it could be that it's a sign of respect for you. Aside from culture though, there's some other things that we'd want to consider. Some clients might bring a gift to help reduce their own feelings of guilt that they might feel for having you help them with their mental health struggles. This also might be their way of trying to compensate for feeling as though they are burdening you with the information that they're sharing during sessions. Other clients may bring gifts as an attempt to manipulate. This might be to try to get in your good graces more, or to encourage you to have more positive thoughts related to them. Next, we need to consider that as the therapist, we might have our own motivations for accepting or declining gifts. This could include awkward feelings that we might have around accepting or declining a gift. Meaning, we might not want to accept or decline the gift to avoid our own awkward feelings of having to have the conversation one way or the other. I think most would agree our own feelings of discomfort around having that conversation should be put aside or bracketed. Additionally, we should also recognize and be mindful that we might be called to accept or decline the gift based on what it is. Of course, a new car would be fantastic, but it might also be something like a client wanting to give us a book that we've really been wanting to read. However, we might also want to decline a gift because it's not really something we like or are necessarily particularly interested in. Whether it's that we want to accept or decline the gift based on our own personal feelings, I think again this is one of those times where we probably should set our own feelings aside. Remember, as the therapist, we are there for the client in a professional sense. Being the professional in the room, we are often going to have to set our own personal feelings aside for the betterment of the client, whatever that might look like. That brings us to therapeutic or clinical reasons for accepting or declining a gift. This is an important area to pay attention to, and I really think a sweet spot of this conversation. Combined with all of the other things that we've talked about up to this point, we're going to be able to make more informed decisions through the lens of our therapeutic reasoning. For example, let's consider that a client wants to give us a greeting card for the holidays. Assuming that there's no site policy that would prohibit this, and knowing that the cost of this is likely minimal, it's probably a good idea to accept this gift. As if we were to decline the card, it would likely negatively impact the therapeutic relationship. Of course, there are times or examples of this that would warrant declining the greeting card. However, in many cases, I think most therapists would be inclined to accept the greeting card from the client. We might also look at a situation where a client keeps bringing cards and letters expressing their gratitude for you. In this case, it would likely be a good idea to explore the client's motivation with them regarding what is driving them to bring these cards. It might also be that we set a boundary related to the cards that we won't be able to accept them anymore in the future. Earlier, we brought up a wealthy client wanting to give us a car. In this case, let's assume that the client is so wealthy that for them to buy and give the therapist a car would have very little to no financial impact on them because they just have that much money. Does this mean that we should accept the gift? Well, probably not. Remember that us accepting a gift from a client, especially a gift like a car that is beyond the $20 that is typically accepted as a small gift, would likely cause some sort of a shift for us related to how we view that client. It might make us feel as though we have to treat the client more graciously or differently in some way, or maybe be more accommodating to them because of this gift that they had given us. When we think through our therapeutic reasoning for accepting or declining a gift, that means that we are thinking through the pros and the cons and how each situation might play out. We're doing this in the context of what we know about our client. This is probably a good time to bring up that what a client does in our office is likely what they're also doing outside of our office. Now, let's cover some tips for how we might decline a gift from a client. But first, if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please help me out by giving it a like and subscribing. It can be helpful to have an idea in our mind of how we might decline a gift from a client. I have a few tips here for how you might go about that, or some things that you might have in mind. But keep in mind that as you do this, you're doing so in the context of that client. That means that how you actually apply these might change a bit, depending on what you know about their client, what you suspect their motivations might be, and just the therapeutic relationship more broadly. My first tip would be that sometimes it can be helpful to express gratitude for the gesture. So although you're declining, let them know that it really means a lot to you and how much you appreciate them having thought about you. A second tip is that you might suggest an alternative. So maybe you can't accept the letter or the card that they want to give you, but maybe you can look at it or read it in session, or that you can talk through it during the session. Another example might be if a client's trying to give you a book, but you can't accept that book for whatever reason, perhaps they could donate the book to the local library. If appropriate, providing suggestions for what the client might do with the gift instead could be helpful for them to still feel as though they were able to contribute in some way. Third, it might be helpful to explain to the client why you can't accept the gift. Specifically, this might be a good time to talk about the ethics of accepting a gift. For example, you might tell the client that because you can't accept every gift that every client gives you, you aren't able to accept any gifts. My fourth tip is very similar to number 3, but you might blame your site policy. If we say this simply, this is making your site's policy kind of look like the bad guy. You might tell them that unfortunately, because of your site's policy, you're prohibited from accepting any gifts from any client. My fifth tip is related to both tips 3 and 4. With some clients, you might discuss how if you were to accept a gift, it may go against your ethics or your site policy. And if these were the cases, you may lose your job or your license. And if you lost your job or your license, that you wouldn't be able to be their therapist anymore. Talking about the possible consequences for you if you were to accept the gift may help soften the blow for the client if you have to decline. Finally, the sixth tip is to process this experience with your client. Allow them the space to discuss what it's like for them to have their gift declined. You might also explore feelings that are coming up for them having their gift declined, and if appropriate, you may validate that experience. As you've probably seen, this is a complex topic, and this certainly isn't an exhaustive list for why you might accept or decline a gift. However, I think that we discussed many things that are most likely to come up and really hit on a lot of the high points of this. That said, I hope that you found this video helpful. While you're here, make sure that you check out some of the other videos on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.